Good morning, fifth graders. Mr. Mace here to help you review for your Unit 2 decimals test that will take place either later today or tomorrow, depending on who your teacher is. This is a 20-question test, so the review that I'm going to go through here today is also going to be 20 questions, or I'm going to tell you what those 20 questions are going to be about. The questions today are not going to be exactly the same as the test, but they are going to be very similar in format and layout. And so if you can answer these questions, or if you remember how to use the little tricks and tips that I'm going to point out today, you should be successful on your Unit 2 test. All right, let's get started here. Question number 1 says, write a word form number in standard form. Example meaning we have a word form number that I'm underlining right here. Okay, that is a number that is written out in word form, and we need to convert it to what we call standard form. And in standard form simply means the normal way we would see numbers, the normal way we would write numbers. Now, I tell my classes over and over again that the key to answering these problems, guys, is to identify where the word and is. Because that word and is always going to be representing a decimal point. So when I find the and, I can just kind of put a decimal point in there and realize that I'm going to have two separate parts. I'm going to have a whole number, and I'm going to have a part of a whole, or a decimal number behind it. And to separate those two pieces, because if I look at that string of, 6 or 7 words there, it can be kind of overwhelming to look at it as a whole. So I find the and look at what it tells me in front of the and. So in this case, I see 300. Well, I know how to write 300, so in front of the decimal point, I'm simply going to write the number 300. And I get to the and now I simply look at the four words that create a number after the decimal point. Okay? And as I look here, I see 208 thousandths. And again, this can almost be broken up into multiple parts as well. Again, I tell my kids that the last part of this, the THS aspect of it, will tell me what place value I want that number to end in. So in this case, it says 208. Well, I know how to write 208, but I got to make sure it ends in the right place value. So it says thousandths. How many place values after the decimal point is thousandths? Well, in this case, it is 3 place values. We've got the tenths, the hundredths, and now the thousandths. And if I write the number 208, it's going to end in that third place value, or the thousandths place. So I don't need to add any zeros in front of that 2. That is how that number is going to be represented. If somehow I end up with a number 4 or something like that, and I need to end in the hundredths place, I might need to have a 0 in front of that 4. So that's how we kind of view and identify those problems moving forward. The next one is a question where they're going to give us the standard form, and then we need to pick out the correct word form option. And this is going to be a multiple choice question on the test. I didn't make it multiple choice here because I figured I could simply explain what I do and how I might figure this out. Again, just like working from the word form to the standard form, guys, I identify where the decimal point is. Okay, and I figure out what I'm looking at there. And I break my number into 2 separate parts. So what do I see in front of the decimal point? I see the word 5, or the number 5, which I will write out as the number 5. I get to that decimal point, I write the word and, pretty straightforward. And then what number do I see after the decimal point? And I just literally say or write the word that I see there. So in this case, this is 43. And then I write what place value it ends in. In this case, this is 2 numbers or 2 place values after the decimal point. So this is the hundredths place. All right, so this number will be written out in word form as 5 and 43 hundredths. All right, and that's pretty straightforward, and that will be a multiple choice question on the test, so you will not be expected to spell that correctly moving forward. All right, question number 3 is going to give you a list of numbers, and it's all about understanding place value. So you're going to look at this list of numbers, and it says to select all the numbers with the digit 1 that has a value of this place value. Now, I probably shouldn't have written this question this way. Remember that we can only ever have 1 decimal point in a number, guys. So if there's a period at the end of that question, make sure that you understand that it is just a period. It's not a second decimal. We can only ever have 1 decimal in a problem. So I'm really looking to find numbers that have a 1, in this case, in the hundredths place. So if I gave you some examples that look like this, okay, this has a 1 in the hundredths place. That would be one I would want to check and make sure I have. If I have a number that looks like this is a 1 in the tenths place, so that would not get the check mark. That one would not qualify for what we're looking for. So in this question, we're simply looking for every problem that has a 1 in the hundredths place, or whatever place value they determine it to be in the problem on the test. Okay? Question number 4. We need to round to the nearest whole number. Well, obviously the key to this one, guys, is what I told my class, what that means right there. What is a whole number? And whole numbers are found in front of the decimal point. So we want to identify what is the closest place value to the decimal point on the larger side of the number. Okay, and that's always going to be this place value right here, and that is the ones place. We will very rarely ever tell you guys to round to the nearest 1 or ones place. That doesn't work that very often. They don't hear that. We almost always say round to the nearest whole number. And then it just applies our normal rounding rules. So if I'm using this as my example, I'm rounding to the ones place. That's why I underline it, rounding to the nearest whole number, and I go to the tenths place, and that will tell me what to do with my ones place number. Remember, everything in front stays the same, so the 8 is going to stay in 8. This 8 in the tenths place, the one with the arrow drawn to it, tells the 2 to go up to a 3, and then everything behind it becomes a 0. Okay, so this is an acceptable answer. This would probably be a better answer because numbers behind the decimal point don't need to be written if they are zeros. All right? That's question 4. All right, now questions 5 through 8, guys. So now we kind of combine a few of them. There's 4 straight questions here that we need to compare the numbers to determine which ones are larger. Okay, we're simply going to use the greater than, less than, or equal to symbols as we answer these 4 problems. And they're going to be, again, multiple choice. So all you need to do is select the correct answer. The key to these ones, guys, again, is to make sure that we are identifying where that decimal point is, because these numbers, if you see, are exactly the same. I see a 1, 2, and a 5, but the 1, 2, and the 5 have different values depending on where that decimal point is. If I look at this first number out here on the left-hand side, the one on the left-hand side, this one right here, is a 1 in the tens place. That is much larger than this one right here, which is a 1 in the ones place. So because I see that, because 1 in the tens place is obviously a larger number, I should use this symbol right here, or since it's multiple choice, I would circle that symbol or put a mark on it to make sure that that is the number I select. All right, question number 9. Matching the rounded number to the place value rounded to. So we're going to give you again a list of about 4 or 5 numbers and the opposite side, those place values and what it would be rounded. So we're going to give you the initial, in this case it's a 6-digit number right here. And this is the number, the one I've underlined, is the one we are using to round to these place values. All right, and then we need to simply match them up with the correct rounding number. So what I would do, if it were me, is I would take 1, go to the rounding, so rounding to the tens place. I'd go back to my original number, and I would identify which place value am I rounding to. So I'm going to erase my line here just so I can go back to my rounding principles. And I want to identify which is the tenths place. So this right here is the tenths place, and this 2 then, the next door neighbor, tells it what to do. So everything in front stays the same. So 125.6, and the 2 tells the 6 to stay the same. And then everything else behind it becomes a 0. So that tells me that the tenths, rounding to the tenths place, this should be my answer, and I would simply match that up. So I'm going to draw a line here. I believe it's putting a letter in on your actual test, but that's all I'm doing for that problem. The next one, the same thing. I'm going to round it to the nearest 100. Notice there is no THS on this one. THS represents decimal place values. This is the hundreds place. And with the 3 examples I gave you here, that's a pretty obvious one because there's only one number that doesn't have a decimal number on it. So I'm not even going to worry about solving that one that way, but I would do the same process that I did for the last example. And then this last one here does have the THS. It does have the decimal place value. So that means, again, erase my little marks there from before. I'm going to come back over here and identify this now is the hundredths place, and this 7 tells that 2 what to do, and obviously it's the last one left, so this is my answer for that one, following those simple rounding principles. All right? So, pretty straightforward with that stuff. Questions 10 and 11 are adding and subtracting decimal numbers. And again, I know I stressed with my class over those questions, guys. Simply making sure that if they write these numbers horizontally, guys, we really need to rewrite these problems and rewrite them vertically. So all I'm going to do on this one, I don't really need to go through, shouldn't need to go through adding and subtracting. I just want to show you how I would rewrite these problems and making sure that I identify again where that place value is and where that decimal point is, because that is the only rule we have for adding and subtracting decimals. We want to make sure we are adding the correct values together. So this problem should be rewritten like this and then solved out. Or this one should be rewritten like this before I solve it. So again, I'm not going to spend a bunch of time actually solving these problems. That's pretty straightforward. I might do the subtracting one here, just I've got a little bit of time left, but I want to make sure I talk about the ungrouping piece. The adding one, I'm hoping you guys know how to regroup and do all that stuff. When I see a problem that looks like this, guys, I can't just bring this 5 down into my answer. I've got to make sure that I've got a 0 on top of it. And so I realize that I've got a bigger number on the bottom and I have to borrow from the place value in front of it. So bigger bottom, I have to borrow. I come next door to my 1 and I make that a 0 and I bring back not a 1, but I bring back a 10. Because every place value is 10 larger than the one in front of it. So this one would be 10 minus 5 is 5. Now again, I've got a 2 which is bigger than the 0 here. So I have to borrow from this place value, and that then makes this a 10. 10 minus 2 is 8. 2 minus 1 is 1. And now I'm literally just subtracting 7 and 0. Gets me to that. My decimal point comes straight into my answer. All right, so again, just 2 questions where we need to make sure we rewrite the problem and line it up correctly. All right, the next couple of problems is talking about estimating and estimating by rounding. And in some of the questions, or one of the questions, I believe they tell you what place value to round to. But what I've told my students is if you see a money problem here, guys, the easiest thing to do is round it to the nearest whole number. Round it to the nearest dollar amount and just make this a dollar problem. So I'm going to show you what I would round these numbers to. $37.27. If I'm rounding to the nearest dollar, I'm identifying those 2 place values again, and that 2 is going to tell that 7 to stay the same. So this becomes $37, and this 8 tells this 5 to get larger. And again, making sure that I line my decimal points up here. And so this problem would actually become $37 plus $6. Remember that estimation, the role and the idea of estimation, guys, is to make sure that we are making the problem easier. All right, making the problem easier. So this then becomes $43 for that example. All right, pretty straightforward stuff. All right, now I'm kind of running low on time here, so I'm going to maybe do this one more story problem and then create a second video. So I will just attach that on to finish up these last 4 or 5 questions. All right, so I'm going to take a couple minutes here. This first story problem that we're going to run across here is very similar to what you're going to see on the test. It says Tina buys a video game for $24.95 and an extra controller for $49.99. Then she receives a discount from the store of about $4, or not of, about $4.50 for buying them together. Tina gives the clerk a $100 bill. How much change should she receive? Hopefully we can identify that this is a multiple step problem. We're going to be doing a couple different things. And again, what I tell my kids all along is identify what the question is asking. Not the whole problem, just the question. So in this case, it's how much change should she receive, meaning we are eventually going to subtract. But I need to know what to subtract, okay? So in this case, she bought 2 things. So I'm going to add those 2 things together, $24.95 and $49.99. And I'm going to quickly add those things together to end up with my new problem of $74.94. All right. And then it said she got a discount. Well, if we get a discount, that means we have to pay less for something. They're giving us money back. So I need to take this away, the $4.50 away from my total, because I'm not going to be paying that. So this is actually a subtraction problem as well. That gets me to $70.44. All right. Now I'm ready to pay. I've got my $100 bill. I'm going to take it down here. I've got my $100 bill like this, writing it out in money terms, and I'm going to subtract to find the change what she owed me, okay, back, and that's going to be $70.44, and she's going to give me back what's left over. All right. I'm running out of time here, guys, in this video, but I'm going to take this out, make it a 0, 9, 9, 9, and a 10.